any movie he made that wasn't really sci-fi or horror. You know, besides Assault on Precinct 13, which could read as a horror movie. I mean, I guess you could say that, like, both of the Escape movies are more action movies, even though there's, like, very sci-fi elements to both of them. Or, like, more dystopian.
Yeah, yeah. More like a George Miller style?
Yeah, almost like a Mad Max. Yeah, he hasn't really moved outside. Now, I don't see why he would. He's really fucking good at making sci-fi and horror, especially that 70s and 80s run is incredible.
Do you think he's ever going to do something else?
I don't know. I would love for him to have done something else. I haven't seen The Ward. I will be watching it, obviously. But it seemed like he hadn't made a movie in so long, and then he does The Ward, which everyone agrees is terrible. And even that was like, what, a decade, maybe, where he wasn't making movies, and then he came back and made that one, and it's been a decade since. I mean, he's not young anymore. He's got to be mid-70s.
Yes.
Maybe here early 70s.
I know he's still doing like conventions and performing.
Yeah, no, you know, he's kind of made the jump into scoring other people's films now.
Yeah, I feel like he seems like maybe he's over directing because of all I feel like he's had a rough time with this stuff, you know, like being sought after way after their releases. It's like a trending thing that I think we kind of glossed over already on the show today, but you know, most of his classics, even Halloween, didn't do big numbers when it first dropped. It was the positive word of mouth, and then everyone was like, oh my god, I gotta see this. But when it first opened, it wasn't like some smash hit or anything, you know. It took a while for the traction to come, and for that to be a repeating thing, maybe he's just like, you know, I don't know if I really want to do this.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he just, I get that, you know. Maybe he wants to do something, but it's kind of hard for him to find a budget, or someone to back him, because, you know, the game has changed, and you need to make, you know, $200 million in your opening weekend, or else you're considered a bomb.
Yeah.
And he's never made, you know, super high budget movies. I think, you know, some of his movies have had bigger budgets than he was used to, but they weren't outrageous. Go
ahead.
I was just gonna say, he's kind of always struck me as more of a cult guy.
Oh yeah, hands down. I feel like he is very much a subculture filmmaker. You know, somebody who's not like your casual moviegoers either aren't gonna like his work or not. They won't know who he is.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see him team up with like A24 or Neon and do something on a minimal budget, you know, so that way, just to see where he's at in his, you know, with this thought process now would be pretty interesting in my opinion.
Yeah. It's, you know, he could do something like that on a lower budget with those studios.
Just kind of like was the Coen that did the Tragedy of Macbeth, you know? Something like that.
By the way, he was born in 1948, so he's in his mid-70s now.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah, he's getting up there in age. I would love to see another movie from him. But maybe he's just, you know, decided not to do it anymore. But hey, man, keep scoring movies.
Yeah.
At least, like, that's cool. Or go out on tour. I would love to see him if he ever comes by here again.
Yeah, that's definitely bucket list stuff right there. See John Carpenter at least once.
Yeah. if he doesn't make a movie, I'd like to always see him, play his music, play it live. I know that he said that this is the most fun he's ever had making a movie. And by the way, you mentioned that it was shot in Panavision, which is the first time he worked in this. And I think Beyond the Ward, if I read my notes correctly, I think all of his movies are shot in Panavision in the scope ratio, the 2.35 to 1. And he rules in that ratio because all of his movies look so good.
Oh, so you said you had some questions for me? Did we already do that?
No, we didn't. You want to get into the question that I have for you?
Yeah, sure.
I think I know what we're going to do. Or do you want to get into like what people said about this later on?
It's really up to you. We can do questions now, or we can knock out, finish up what we have to say on the movies and then dive into the questions.
Let's knock out the stuff first.
Okay.
So, as you mentioned, this movie obviously doesn't really do much business in the U.S. Even his friend Dan O'Bannon, who I guess they had a falling out a little bit later, even Dan O'Bannon hated it. Apparently made it a point to tell him that he hated it.
I think I know what you're talking about, that he was said that Carpenter had some kind of lack of humanity or something, and that it came through in the movie.
Yeah. I think that's a quote from a book I gave you for Christmas. I think that's quoted in that book, that shock value book. Look it up. I think I read that who the author that was attributed to that quote came from that book, which is all about kind of how horror movies kind of change the game.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's for all the listeners. That's one of the gifts I gave Wesley for Christmas. But as you said, it goes overseas. He gets praised at Cannes from one of the filmmakers who he modeled Assault on Precinct 13 after, and that's George Romero. George Romero loved Assault on Precinct 13. He
said something like that he felt like Precinct 13 blew everybody out of the water, like they weren't even there.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's awesome. If I was making a movie that was modeled after, one of my favorite films or one of my favorite director of said film said, whoa, that movie fucking blew me away. That's high praise, man.
It is.
So as you mentioned, it goes to the London Film Festival where it really picks up traction. And I want to read you the direct quote from the festival director. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. John Carpenter, whose small-budget science fiction epic Dark Star was widely acclaimed, has turned his inventive imagination to the thriller for his first solo directional effort. The result, even without taking into consideration his tiny budget and cast of unknowns, is astonishing. Assault on Precinct 13 is one of the most powerful and exciting crime thrillers from a new director in a long time. It grabs hold of the audience and simply doesn't let go as it builds to a crescendo of irrational violence that reflects only too well our fears of unmotivated attack. It is a frightening look at the crumbling of rational ideas of law and order under an irresistible attack by the forces of irrationality and death. That's a pretty great quote.
Yeah, I think it's pretty spot on too.
So that festival is what puts it over the top in Europe and creates this massive cult hit out of this film. They start comparing Carpenter to Howard Hawks, who made Rio Bravo. Even though I don't like Rio Bravo, I like Howard Hawks as a director. he gets that praise. And then some people that we've talked about before that have loved another movie we've mentioned on the show, Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg, both big fans of the movie. Simon Pegg says, you couldn't really call it an action film because it was pre the evolution of that kind of film, and yet it is kind of an action film in a way. And then Edgar Wright says, it's very much Carpenter's kind of urban Western in the way it's staging Rio Bravo set up in downtown LA. And the other thing is, for a low-budget film particularly, it looks great. And I wholeheartedly agree with that one. And I got one more quote for you.
Okay.
In 1999, Premiere Magazine wrote this about the film. A trim, grim, vicious, and incredibly effective action movie with no cut comic relief bit players, no winks at the audience, and no stars. Just a powder keg of a premise in which a quasi-terrorist group's killing spree culminates in the action described in the title. Carpenter's mastery of widescreen and almost uncanny talent as crafting suspense and action sequences makes Assault such a nerve-wracking experience that you may have to reupholster your easy chair after watching it at home. But I think those are some really good quotes to kind of sum up, what this movie is and how great and gritty on such kind of a basic premise. It's a low-budget film. Like we've said, there's really no big stars in the movie. But it's so effective. And we've talked about From Dusk Till Dawn. But, certain types of movies like Die Hard, I was even thinking Green Room, kind of has a bit of that Assault on Precinct 13 thing going for it.
Oh, yeah, it does, totally.
So obviously for a movie that wasn't a hit, it has a lot more of a cultural footprint now, and you can see its influence in a lot of other films. So now let's get some questions in.
All right, I'm ready.
All right. I know you had a couple for me. I got a couple for you. Have you seen the remake of this?
That was one of my questions. Yes. Yes, I've seen it.
Thoughts on the remake?
I thought it was pretty decent for it being a remake. I didn't really have an issue. I thought the cast was great. Of course, I like the OG better, but it's a good effort, Mm-hmm. What about yourself?
I don't dislike it. I don't hate it.
So are you indifferent?
I'm kind of indifferent to it. I do think Ethan Hawke is really good in it.
Okay.
Especially the beginning. He's kind of like the burned out. That's why he's like the burned out ex-undercover cop that gets assigned like the shit detail. It's got a solid cast. I remember liking that, there were some more recognizable people in the cast.
Yeah.
But none of them are safe. At the end, there's only 2 survivors. Well, 3. The Napoleon Wilson role is Lawrence Fishburne, but he's more of like a crime boss.
Yes.
Like a major criminal, as opposed to just some random death row prisoner.
Isn't Drea De Matteo in it from Sopranos?
Yeah. She's one of the few survivors. It's not a movie that I'll watch multiple times, but I remember watching it and being like, this isn't awful. It does have some good stuff in it. I don't like that everyone assaulting the precinct was like a SWAT member, basically.
Yeah.
Like a special forces. But it does have some decent stuff in it, and like I said, I was impressed that they kind of committed to killing most of the people, no matter who they were. I mean, like the filmmakers kind of committed to killing most of